Look around you. How many people are truly making decisions for themselves? How many are living a life they chose rather than the one they settled for? The truth is, most people are shackled by invisible chains, chains that feel comfortable but keep them trapped in place. Comfort is deceptive. It feels safe, familiar, predictable. But what if I told you that comfort is the silent thief of your potential? That the life you've always wanted is on the other side of everything you're afraid to let go of? People stay in jobs they hate, in routines that drain them, in environments that suffocate their growth, not because they want to, but because they fear the unknown. The mind convinces them that staying put is better than the uncertainty of stepping forward, and so they remain stuck, trading their dreams for a false sense of security. But deep down, there's a voice inside you, a whisper that refuses to be silenced. It knows you're meant for more. It knows that every time you choose comfort over challenge, you shrink yourself. You dim your own light. And the biggest tragedy? Most people ignore that voice until it's too late. Until they wake up one day, realizing they spent their whole life waiting for the right time, waiting for permission, waiting for the fear to go away. But the right time never comes. The fear never fully disappears. And the permission? It was never anyone else's to give. If you feel that pull inside you, if you know deep down that you're capable of more, you have two choices. You can silence it, pretend it isn't there, and continue walking the well-trodden path, or you can listen. You can step forward, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's uncertain. Because growth doesn't happen in safety. It happens when you dare to break the chains that have held you back. The question is, will you? Why do people hesitate before making a decision? Why do they instinctively glance around, searching for approval before taking a step forward? It's because from the moment we're born, we're taught to follow. Society trains people like a well-oiled machine. From school to work, from friendships to social media, there's an unspoken rule: stay in line, don't stray too far, and never disrupt the order. If you follow, you're accepted. If you stand out, you're questioned. And that pressure to belong keeps most people caged. They won't admit it, but they care about what their friends will say, what their family will think, what strangers on the internet might whisper behind their screens. The fear of judgment is so strong that they'd rather abandon their dreams than risk disapproval. But here's the cost. Every time you seek validation, you trade a piece of your independence. Every time you wait for someone else to say, "Go for it," you surrender your power. And before you know it, you've spent years living a life designed by the expectations of others. So ask yourself, when was the last time you made a decision without looking around for approval? When was the last time you trusted yourself completely, without needing anyone else to agree? Because the ones who change their lives are the ones who dare to move, even when no one else understands. A lion that depends on the pack for survival will never know its own strength. It will always wait for the pack to lead, to hunt, to protect, and in that waiting it loses what makes it powerful. Most people do the same. They rely on others for confidence, for direction, for the reassurance that they're making the right choice. But here's the truth. Strength isn't something you can borrow. It's something you must build. Think about it. If your confidence only exists when someone else believes in you, is it really yours? If your decisions are based on the approval of others, are they truly your decisions? There's a difference between support and dependency. Support fuels your growth, but dependency traps you. And the harsh reality is many people don't realize they're dependent until the moment they have to stand alone. That's when they panic. That's when they feel lost, unsure, unsteady, because they never learned to trust themselves. But look at history. The boldest decisions, the ones that shaped the world, were made alone. The greatest leaders, the most successful innovators, the most fearless trailblazers. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for someone to hold their hand. They stepped forward, not because they weren't afraid, but because they refused to let fear dictate their path. And that's what you have to decide right now. Are you going to keep waiting for someone to tell you you're ready? Or will you take that step and build the strength that's already inside you? Because the moment you stop depending on others to give you courage, that's the moment you become unstoppable. You've felt it before. that hesitation, that tightness in your chest before making a big decision. The moment you consider stepping away from the crowd, fear creeps in, whispering all the reasons why you shouldn't. What if you fail? What if people laugh? What if you lose everything? But here's what most people don't realize. Fear is a test, not a stop sign. It doesn't exist to hold you back. It exists to see if you're ready to move forward. Every person who has ever achieved something great faced this moment. Every leader, every inventor, every trailblazer felt the weight of fear pressing against them. And yet they walked through it. Not because they had guarantees, not because they knew the outcome, but because they refused to let fear decide their future. Most people, however, let fear win. They see the wall and turn back. They tell themselves, maybe later, maybe when I'm ready. But later never comes. Readiness never arrives. And that's the difference between those who succeed and those who don't. The ones who break through, who create, who lead, who build, these are the ones who face fear head on. They step toward it instead of away from it. Because the truth is, fear never leaves. But if you walk forward despite it, you'll realize something powerful. The wall you've been afraid of, you've averted your fate. It was never solid. It was never real. It was only ever the illusion of a limit. And the moment you step through it, you'll see. On the other side of fear is everything you've been searching for. There comes a moment in your life when you realize that no one is coming to save you. No one is going to hand you permission, lift you up, or make the hard decisions for you. And in that moment you have two choices: keep waiting or step forward alone. Most people fear walking alone because they mistake independence for loneliness. They think standing apart means being isolated, that choosing their own path means losing everything familiar. But the truth is, walking alone is not loneliness, it's power. It's the birth of real strength. Look at the ones who changed the world, the pioneers, the leaders, the visionaries. They didn't follow the crowd, they didn't wait for approval, they stood on their own when no one else believed, when the path was uncertain, when the doubts were loud. And because they did, the world followed them. You were not meant to blend in. You were not designed to live a life dictated by fear and conformity. There is a fire inside you, a force waiting to be unleashed. But that power isn't found in the crowd. It isn't found in waiting for permission. It's found in the courage to stand on your own. And when you take that first step, when you embrace the weight of independence, you'll realize something incredible. The moment you stop searching for security in others, the moment you stop needing the safety of the familiar, you unlock something unshakable within yourself. This is your turning point. This is where you decide. Will you stay where it's comfortable, or will you step into the unknown and claim the life that's waiting for you? Because the ones who dare to walk alone, the ones who refuse to be bound by fear, are the ones the world will one day follow. How much of your life is built on what others expect from you? How many of your choices, big or small, are truly yours? It happens so slowly that most people don't even notice. One day, you're a child, full of dreams, speaking about what you want to be when you grow up. The next, you're an adult, making choices not based on what excites you, but on what keeps others comfortable. You pick a safe career because your parents think it's the right choice. You avoid risks because your friends might not understand. You hold back your ideas because you fear judgment. And without realizing it, you become a version of yourself shaped by everyone else's expectations. Here's the truth. People-pleasing isn't kindness. It's not generosity. It's a slow surrender of your identity. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't align with you, you say no to your own life. Every time you prioritize keeping the peace over speaking your truth, you lose another piece of yourself. The world is full of people who gave up their dreams just to avoid disappointing someone else. But here's the question you need to ask yourself. When was the last time you did something because you truly wanted to, not because it pleased someone else? Because if you can't answer that, then maybe, just maybe, you've been living for everyone but yourself. Control doesn't always look like control. It doesn't come with shackles or force. It comes disguised as loyalty, tradition, and the need to keep the peace. Most people don't realize they're trapped because the chains are invisible. They think they're making their own choices, but in reality they're waiting for permission, for approval, for a sign that what they're doing is acceptable. And that waiting weakens them. Think about it. How many times have you wanted to take a risk but held back because of what someone else might say? How many dreams have you put on hold because the people around you didn't understand them? That hesitation, that second guessing, it becomes a habit, and habits shape lives. Before you know it, your confidence fades. You stop trusting yourself. You seek validation for every step you take, and soon you're no longer in control of your own future. Someone else is. If you can't make a move without someone's approval, you're not in control of your life. And if that's the case, the real question is, how much longer are you willing to live this way? Look at the people who changed the world, the ones who built, created, and inspired. They all have one thing in common. They refused to let others control their path. There was a time when no one believed in them, a time when they were told to be realistic, to play it safe, to follow the path that made sense to everyone else. But instead of listening, they did something different. They walked away from expectations and chose to do it their way. The entrepreneur who left behind a secure paycheck to build something of their own. Everyone doubted them at first, but now they lead. The athlete who was told they weren't good enough, ignored the noise and pushed harder until they redefined success. The artist who refused to follow trends, chose to create from the heart and built a legacy instead. None of them were given permission. None of them were handed approval. They didn't wait for the world to understand them. They just moved. Because at the end of the day, every great success story begins with someone saying, "I'll do it my way." The question is, will yours? There are two types of people in this world, the one who waits and the one who moves. The one who waits always has a reason to hesitate. They need a sign, a push, a guarantee. They spend years asking for permission, checking for approval, and making sure the path is safe before they take a single step. And in that waiting, they waste time. They watch as opportunities pass them by. Then there's the one who moves. They don't have all the answers. They don't know every step, but they step forward anyway. They don't wait for support. They build themselves up. They don't ask for guarantees. They create their own chances. And the difference between these two people, the one who waits gets left behind. The one who moves creates their future. So ask yourself, who are you? The person standing still, waiting for everything to feel right? Or the person who moves, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's uncertain? Because life doesn't reward the ones who hesitate, it rewards the ones who take action. And if you're still waiting, understand this. The only thing you're losing is time. Every time you hesitate because of what others might think, you give away a piece of your power. Every time you let someone else's opinion shape your choices, you trade your freedom for their approval. And before you know it, you're no longer living your own life. You're living a version of it designed by everyone else. The truth is simple. You either stand on your own or you get controlled. There is no middle ground. The world doesn't wait for people who refuse to claim their own path. It molds them, shapes them, bends them to fit into a system that keeps them small. But those who stand alone, those who dare to move without waiting for permission, they are the ones who rise above. Walking alone is hard, but staying trapped is harder. Because if you can't stand alone, you will always be controlled. And the question you have to ask yourself is, are you willing to keep handing over your power? Or is today the day you finally take it back? Because the second you decide to stop seeking approval, stop waiting, stop hesitating, that's the moment you become unstoppable. How many of your thoughts are truly your own? How many of your beliefs, choices, and opinions come from deep self-reflection? And how many were simply handed to you by others? Most people don't think for themselves. They follow ideas without questioning them. They repeat what they've heard, agree with what's popular, and mold their beliefs to fit the world around them. And in doing so, they lose something priceless: their independence. The danger of groupthink is that it feels comfortable. It feels safe to go along with what others believe. It feels easier to agree than to challenge, to blend in rather than stand out. But here's the cost. When you let others decide for you, you give up control of your own life. Real power begins the moment you start questioning. Why do I believe this? Why do I follow this path? Is this truly my choice? Or have I simply accepted what I was told? The first step to freedom is learning to trust your own judgment. It's making decisions not because they are expected, but because they are right for you. It's having the courage to think for yourself, even when the world disagrees. Because the ones who shape their own thoughts, they shape their own future. Your mind is like a house. If too many people have the keys, you'll never feel at home. Think about it. Every time you let someone else's opinion override your own, you give away a piece of yourself. Every time you let outside pressure dictate your choices, you allow someone else to hold the keys to your mind. And if you're not careful, you'll wake up one day realizing you don't even recognize the person you've become. How many times have you changed your decisions because of what someone else might think? How often do you hesitate because you fear judgment, rejection, or disapproval? This is how people lose themselves. Not all at once, but little by little, in small moments of surrender. If you're always adjusting your path to fit someone else's expectations, you're not living your life, you're living theirs. So, ask yourself, who are you allowing to shape your thoughts and decisions? Whose voice is louder in your head, yours or theirs? Because until you take back the keys, you will always be a guest in your own mind. Confidence isn't built through approval. It's not given, gifted, or handed over by others. Real confidence comes from one thing: self-trust. But here's the problem. Most people think confidence comes from outside. They believe they'll feel strong once others recognize them, once they get enough praise, enough reassurance, enough support. And so they chase approval, thinking it will make them feel secure. But what happens when that approval disappears? When the praise fades? When no one is there to reassure you? That's when you see the truth. If your confidence depends on outside validation, then it was never real to begin with. Real confidence is built from the inside out. It comes from knowing who you are, from trusting your own decisions, from standing firm even when no one else agrees. It's not about being fearless, it's about moving forward even when fear is present. So ask yourself, are you building confidence that lasts, or are you relying on temporary reassurance to feel strong? Because if you need constant approval, you're never truly free. Most people are terrified of being alone. They associate it with loneliness, emptiness, and isolation. But here's what they don't realize. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely. One is a choice, the other is a fear. Loneliness is what happens when you feel disconnected from yourself. It's when you need outside validation to feel whole. It's when silence makes you uneasy because, deep down, you haven't learned to be comfortable with your own thoughts. But being alone? That's something entirely different. It's a place of power. It's where you find clarity, where you develop strength, where you learn who you truly are without outside noise telling you what to be. The strongest leaders, the greatest thinkers, the most creative minds, all of them spent time alone, not because they were isolated, but because they understood something most people never do. Solitude is where you grow. When you stand strong in solitude, you gain something others never will: self-respect. You stop chasing approval, stop fearing judgment, and start making decisions that truly align with who you are. Because the fear of loneliness disappears the moment you start building a life you actually want. There's always a moment before making an independent decision where hesitation creeps in. That brief second where doubt whispers, what if you're wrong? What if people judge you? What if you fail? And this is where most people stop. They hesitate too long, they overthink, they look around searching for approval, waiting for someone to give them the green light, and in that waiting, their opportunity slips away. But what happens when you stop asking for permission? Everything changes. The moment you decide to trust yourself, to move without needing someone else's approval, you take back control of your life. You stop being shaped by fear and start being shaped by action. So ask yourself, what decisions are you postponing because you're afraid of what people will say? What have you put on hold, not because it wasn't the right move, but because you were waiting for someone else to agree? Because waiting doesn't lead to change, action does. Step by step, choice by choice, you can reclaim your decisions, your confidence, and your future. But only if you stop waiting and start moving forward. A tree that stands alone grows the deepest roots. In a forest, trees grow tall together, their roots intertwined, supporting one another. But a tree that stands alone, it has no choice but to grow deeper, to anchor itself with unshakable strength. And that's exactly what happens when you learn to stand alone. Most people fear solitude because they see it as emptiness, as a sign of weakness. But solitude is not isolation, it's a test that forces you to face yourself, to strip away distractions, and to build an unbreakable foundation. When you're alone, you start to see who you really are. You stop living for approval, you stop shaping yourself to fit expectations, and you start listening to your own voice. Solitude sharpens focus, it forces clarity, it teaches you resilience in a way nothing else can. But here's the real question. Are you avoiding being alone, or are you afraid of what you'll find in the silence? Because if you can't face yourself, if you can't stand alone with your own thoughts, then who exactly are you without the noise of the world? Independence isn't a weakness, it's the foundation of real strength. Most people fear walking alone because they think it means being isolated, disconnected, or without support. But the truth is, solitude is a gift. It's the space where true self-awareness is built, where distractions fade, and where you discover who you are without outside influence. When you stand alone, you stop relying on approval to feel secure. You stop bending yourself to fit into spaces that don't align with you. Instead, you build confidence that isn't dependent on anyone else. And that's where your greatest advantage lies. Because while most people run from solitude, filling every moment with noise, you learn to embrace it. You turn it into strength. You use it to sharpen your mind, refine your goals, and move with clarity that others never develop. The difference between loneliness and solitude is simple. One drains you, the other empowers you. Loneliness is a craving for external validation. Solitude is mastery over yourself. If you can stand alone without fear, you become something rare. Someone who doesn't need permission to rise. History doesn't remember those who followed the crowd. It remembers those who walked alone, the ones who dared to be different before the world was ready for them. Every great leader, artist, and thinker faced rejection before they were celebrated. They were ridiculed, doubted, cast aside, until the world caught up to their vision. The scientist who challenged the status quo and reshaped history, people mocked them, dismissed their ideas, called them foolish. But they pressed forward, and now their discoveries have changed the way we live. The artist who refused to follow trends, ignored the noise, stayed true to their vision, and created something that outlived their critics. The entrepreneur who built something from nothing, while others played it safe, they took the risk, stood alone, and created an empire. What separates these people from the rest? They weren't waiting for acceptance. They weren't seeking approval. They walked alone, not because it was easy, but because they knew that real success, real power, real impact only comes when you have the courage to stand apart. And that's the truth most people don't want to hear. If you want to change your life, if you want to do something meaningful, you have to be willing to walk alone before anyone understands why. Because those who dare to stand alone are the ones who end up leading. The world laughs at independent thinkers until they succeed. At first, society will reject you. It will question you, mock you, try to push you back in line, because when you stand alone, you become unpredictable. You stop following the script, and that makes people uncomfortable. But here's what they don't tell you. Rejection is often the first sign that you're on the right path. Think about it. Every world-changing idea was once ridiculed. Every leader was once doubted. Every breakthrough was once considered impossible until it wasn't. How many people were told their dreams were too big, their ideas too unrealistic? How many times were they told to be practical or stick to what's safe? And yet, the very people who laughed at them were the same ones who later praised them when they proved everyone wrong. Because that's how the world works. At first, they question you, then they watch you, and if you keep going, if you refuse to back down, eventually, they respect you. So, don't fear rejection, don't fear being misunderstood, because if you learn to walk alone, you become unstoppable. Most people spend their lives chasing approval. They seek motivation from the outside, waiting for encouragement, for permission, for someone to tell them they're on the right path. But true strength isn't built on approval. It's built on knowing who you are, even when no one is watching. When you rely on external motivation, you become a prisoner of it. If people praise you, you feel strong. If they doubt you, you question yourself. And that cycle never ends, until you decide to break free. The shift happens when you stop looking outside for strength and start finding it within. When you realize that real power isn't about being seen, it's about being sure. It's about walking forward even when no one else understands your path. Solitude teaches you something most people never learn. How to trust yourself, how to rely on your own judgment, how to stand firm even when the world doubts you. Because those who master walking alone never have to fear being left behind. They move on their own terms, they build their own path. And when you do that, you stop chasing approval, because you no longer need it. A ship tied to the dock will never sail. It might feel safe, secure, protected from the waves, but a ship wasn't built to stay in one place. It was meant to move, to explore, to reach distant horizons. And yet, That's how most people live their lives, tied down by fear, afraid to leave the comfort of the shore, afraid to step away from what's familiar, afraid to trust themselves without someone else's approval. But here's the truth. The hardest decision you'll ever make is to believe in yourself before anyone else does. To move forward without guarantees, to take that first step, knowing that fear will try to hold you back. Fear is always there. It whispers doubts, creates hesitation, and tries to convince you that staying put is the right choice. But ask yourself, if you never untie yourself from fear, how far will you really go? Because the moment you stop asking for permission, the moment you decide to move despite the fear, that's when life truly begins. So, are you ready to set sail? Or will you stay tied down, watching others live the life you were meant to create? People will question you, not because you're wrong, but because you're different. Most people don't like change. They don't like things they can't predict, can't control, or don't understand. So when you decide to step away from the crowd, to carve your own path, expect resistance. Not because your choices are flawed, but because others are afraid to make the same ones. Doubt rarely comes from logic, it comes from fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of being wrong, fear of what happens when someone refuses to follow the script. But here's the real danger. If you listen to every doubt, if you constantly seek approval before making a move, you will never trust yourself enough to take action. So ask yourself, are you living your life for yourself or for the expectations of others? Are your choices truly yours, or are they shaped by what will make others comfortable? Because the moment you start trusting your own wisdom, the moment you stop looking for approval, you become untouchable. People may doubt you, but it won't shake you. The world may question you, but it won't stop you. Because when you trust yourself, you no longer need anyone else to. Every time you justify your choices, you give someone else the power to question them. Think about how many times you've explained yourself. How many times you felt the need to defend your dreams, your goals, your next move? How many times you've hesitated because you were afraid someone wouldn't understand? But here's the truth. The boldest people don't wait for permission. They don't pause to explain. They act. They adjust. They keep moving. The moment you start justifying every decision, you invite others to challenge it. You open the door for doubt. And once doubt enters, it slows you down. It makes you second-guess yourself. But here's the shift. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your power. You move with confidence. You make choices because they feel right to you, not because they make sense to someone else. So here's your test. Make one decision today without overthinking it, without explaining it, without seeking approval. It doesn't have to be big, just one choice that is purely your own. Because the more you practice this, the stronger you become. The less you justify, the more you trust yourself. And the more you trust yourself, the freer you are. Most people are afraid of walking alone. They assume that if no one is beside them, they must be going the wrong way. But the truth is, those who fear being alone often end up following the wrong crowd. When you rely on others for direction, you never learn how to lead yourself. You become dependent on approval, on acceptance, on the illusion of security that comes from blending in. But blending in doesn't build strength. Walking alone does, because here's what no one tells you. Solitude is where real growth happens. It's in the silence, in the moments where no one is watching, that you develop something unshakable. Independence, confidence, a deep understanding of who you are. The strongest people are not the ones surrounded by a crowd. They are the ones who can stand firm even in silence. They don't wait for company before taking a step forward. They don't hesitate just because no one else sees their vision. So ask yourself, are you afraid of walking alone, or are you afraid of what will happen if you never learn how? Because once you build the kind of independence that makes you unstoppable, you will never fear standing alone again. A person who can walk alone will never be controlled. Think about that for a moment. If you can make your own choices, if you can trust your own voice, if you can stand firm even when no one else agrees, then no one can dictate your future. No one can hold you back. No one can make you small. Most people never reach this point. They spend their whole lives waiting for approval, waiting for permission, waiting for a sign that it's safe to move. But waiting is a trap. It keeps you stuck. It keeps you watching while others move forward. But you don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to keep waiting. Because here's the truth. You don't need approval. You don't need permission. You only need to take the first step. And the real question is, are you ready? Are you ready to stop waiting, to stop explaining, to stop fearing what might go wrong and start moving toward what could go right? Because the moment you decide to walk your own path, everything changes. The world belongs to those who are bold enough to take it. So, are you ready?